There was a shooting in Colorado at an LGBTQ nightclub at which 5 people were killed. The left and the media spent the week telling us that this was a hate crime that was driven by people like Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, which is an outright slander of Matt Walsh, who has been standing up against mutilation of minors before they reach the age of majority by overzealous parents who want them to have sex change operations when they're too young to even drive or vote or drink or have a cigarette. So they tried to blame it on the right wing, Tucker, Matt, usual suspects. And it was actually pretty outrageous what they were doing. And Chris Rufo, also in the New York Times, smeared as having led to this. And then it comes out late Tuesday. The defense lawyers for this person, who is a man, it's a biological man, say that this person, and we don't name mass shooters on this program, is actually non-binary. And then they say that this person prefers using the pronouns they and them. Okay, they and them. So I'll just give you a sample of how the media, who like, all you need to do is say like a whiff of like Demi Lovato. I'm non-binary, I'm they, them. Immediately, they, them, she, he, whatever, non-binary. They're totally respectful because you're Demi Lovato. You're a star. But when you shoot people, and they really were counting on you on being a right-wing white supremacist kind of person, they're really not so sure whether your non-binary thing is real. Look at Alison Camerata and her guests on CNN.
In a footnote to a motion asserting legal privileges, the public defenders say, quote, is non-binary. They use they, them pronouns, and for the purposes of all formal filings will be addressed as mix. So in other words, not Mr. or Ms. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's not anything that we had heard from his background. You know, people have been looking into his background. And I don't know if anybody here, are you guys lawyers? I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's what he's now saying.
It sounds like they're trying to prepare a defense against a hate crimes charge. That's the least of his problems, legally speaking, but it looks like they're trying to build some kind of sympathy or at least confusion on the question of whether or not this was purely motivated by hate.
That is what it sounds like.
Oh, really? Oh, they have misgendered this person as well. You're not allowed to say his or he once the person has declared themselves as non-binary. It's fascinating, the situational ethics that come up.
It's astonishing. That is astonishing, given that we have been told that all it takes for it to be objectively, cosmically true is for somebody to declare it. And now we learn that perhaps that's not the case. I find this whole tendency depressing. I've been complaining about this for a decade. I think the correct person to blame in acts of political violence is the person who committed the act of political violence. This is, as I've said too many times probably on this podcast, a big and free country. If you want to, you will always be able to find some connection between something somebody somewhere has said and something somebody somewhere has done. But in almost all cases, you should not. You should not for a couple of reasons. First, because people who are mentally ill, as the shooters often are, not always, but often are going to glom on to something as a means by which to justify or explain their actions. Now, sometimes it's very obviously beyond the pale. The shooter at the Navy Yard, for example, thought that the government was sending him messages through the wall from a microwave. But sometimes it's quotidian political content of left or right. They pick it up. It doesn't mean that it actually influenced them in any meaningful way. It just means that they found it, and in their insanity, they absorbed it. The second reason is that ultimately the purpose of pointing fingers is to shut people up. Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times wrote the most astonishing column last week in which she said at the outset, we don't know what the motive was. The police have not established a motive. And then having got that out of the way, she wrote a couple of paragraphs in which she blamed people by name. She mentioned Ben Shapiro. She mentioned Matt Walsh. She mentioned Chris Rufo. Despite there being no motive, these people explicitly were to blame. Now, the reason that she did that it's not because she has any evidence that one led to the other, not because she can draw a line between the two, not that it would even be fair to draw a line between the two, but because she wants those people to be quiet. She wants to add in a little friction so the next time they think of saying what they believe politically, in, it must be said, an area that has absolutely nothing to do with shooting up an LGBT club, they hesitate for a moment, and her side of the political aisle, ideologically or politically, or on a partisan basis, gains some advantage. And this is not only revolting in and of itself in a free country, but it's so transparent because it's never done the other way around. The most obvious connection that we have seen in the last 5 years was between the anti-Trump, anti-Republican rhetoric that cropped up in early 2017 and the shooting at the congressional baseball field, where actual Republican lawmakers were targeted because they were writing, debating, and voting on a bill that had been demonized. And I wrote at the time that the shooter there still should be held responsible exclusively for what he had done, because the alternative is telling people who disagree with the Republican Party in Congress about matters of great import that they need to be quiet. And this is just not an acceptable way to run a free country. We cannot have a system where people are expected to stay silent in case somewhere out there on the fringes, under a rock, there is a madman or a zealot. If you stand up and say, look, I think this person should be killed, sure, you could be criticized for that. If you are, if you are emphatic in your politics, you obviously should not be held liable. Right back to the beginning of this country, we have had emphatic politics. We used to burn people in effigy, for goodness sake, for their foreign policy views in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So I think this is just an absolutely revolting habit. I think that it is the worst sort of advantage taking. And I wish to goodness that it would stop. But if it's not going to stop, which it probably isn't, it just has to be ignored.
The one thing that many people who are just reasonable have criticized that they're now railing on is these drag queen shows for toddlers, for preschool, for young school-age children, because this LGBTQ facility was going to have some sort of drag queen show the next day. And it is true that the names you mentioned, many people at National Review and others have been critical of drag queen story hour for kids in the single digits who don't need any example of sexualized anything in front of them, and certainly not of cross-dressing, transgenderism. And a lot of these shows are sexual in their presentation. So yeah, a lot of parents have said, you know what, when I lived in Chicago, there was this great transvestite bar that you could go to. And I'm telling you, you'd leave there very confused, male or female. These are biological men who did a show dressed as women, and they were totally gorgeous. That's fine. Why take issue with people who are doing adult entertainment that's kind of fun, it's kind of saucy, it's racy? We're talking about kids. That's what the Daily Wire guys are talking about, Chris Rufo. That's what they're talking about. And yet, you get people like NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins blaming the right wing for the Colorado shooting because you're not allowed to object to that, because you're in danger. What you're saying, if you object to that stuff, is trans lives don't matter. Listen to this guy painting himself in false glory for his own approach to his reporting, and at his wit's end that people critical of these things won't just shut up. Here he is.
I do want to say, though, am I doing something wrong here? Here are some headlines that I wrote the last 6 months. Fueled by internet's far-right machine, anti-LGBTQ threats shut down trans rights and drag events. And I'm just wondering, what could I have done different? Seriously, as reporters, what can we do different? I am trying to thread this needle here. I'm trying to say that this is happening. This targeted stuff has real-life impacts. But I think we have to have a come-to-Jesus moment here. As reporters, are we more afraid of being on Breitbart for saying that trans people deserve to be alive? Or are we more afraid of the dead people? Because I'm more afraid of the dead people.
You're doing your job. You're uncovering the truth.
These bodies are not in the ground yet.
Yeah.
And they're being used as political props right now.
Well, that last line was true, except he's got the perpetrator wrong.
I mean, look, if Ben Collins wants to improve himself, he should quit his job and go and live in a monastery. The guy is a clown. I would just ask what the mechanism is supposed to be here to prevent this. As I've said, I don't see a line between A and B, but let's assume that there is one. And let's take a much more clear-cut example, because as you pointed out, when people say that children should not be exposed to sexualized drag queen shows, they are not saying that drag queens in adult clubs should be shut down. But let's take a much more clear-cut example. Let's say abortion. So I think abortion is killing. Now, if somebody hears me say that, as they will, given that this show is going out to America, and then they shoot up an abortion clinic, what am I supposed to do to prevent that? The only conclusion I can come to is that I'm not supposed to say it, which is crazy. And it's very self-evidently crazy to progressives when the tides are turned. When somebody walked into the Family Research Council and opened fire, it would, of course, have been preposterous to say, well, as a result, progressive groups are no longer allowed to talk about the importance of gay marriage. When the congressional baseball shooter showed up at that field, it would have been preposterous to say, well, there is no longer any justification for the Democratic Party to oppose the Republican repeal and replace plan for Obamacare. I think it's just as ridiculous here.
It's the Christmas and holiday season and time for gift giving, parties with friends and family, and for getting compliments everywhere you go, we hope. Thanks to the fact that you look years younger, courtesy of Genucel. Millions love Genucel's products, and for good reason. From now through Christmas, Genucel's most popular package, all their best stuff, is 70% off at Genucel.com. Treat yourself and a loved one to the absolute best skincare in the world. See those troubling forehead lines, fine lines, skin redness, puffy bags, puffiness, even a sagging jawline disappear right before your eyes with Genucel's most popular collection. With its immediate effects product, you can see results in less than 12 hours guaranteed, or you can get your money back. And included in every most popular package is your free hyaluronic acid serum for skin hydration that will restore your youthful appearance. Visit Genucel.com/MK now. Enter my special promo, MK, for an additional 10% off your entire order. Every order today is instantly upgraded to free express shipping, so nothing to worry about in terms of getting it before the holidays. Genucel.com/MK60. That's GENUCEL.com/MK60. Genucel.com/MK60. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.